So, Chris, while you're doing email, um, when you're thinking about your sports idol, someone that's meaningful to you, like who comes to mind, right? You know,
Where are we gonna go first? Well, um, if I had to go childhood, I'd probably, go with like a mainstream choice like Michael Jordan.
hmm.
Um, you?
Well, if you narrow it down to skiing,
Oh, well, obviously John Eves is this year's inductee into the 2000 into the ski U.S. Ski Hall of
Hall
Fame.
of
So
Fame, right?
it's a pretty big deal.
For those of you who don't know, John Eves. Are we supposed to look in the camera when we do that? Is that
You can do you. So that would be your camera.
Oh, that one?
Yeah, the one.
Nice. John Eves. So Fire and Ice, great movie. He's a stuntman, and he happens to live in Calgary, I'm told.
It's true. I have found his address actually, and then I drove by his house, but he wasn't outside, so I didn't get a chance to talk to him.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, but we did do some long range planning last month. And one of the things on the plan in the next 5 years that we hope to achieve is actually meeting John Eves.
Yes.
So that's very exciting.
I think we'll do that when we grow Cove. What's safe to say? I guess that to 500 million, right? That's just a good one, and then we'll just end up and invite him, right?
That's
to
right.
A nice, good ski session.
Yeah,
I like it.
Maybe we'll go to
Awesome.
Banff.
Banff,
Maybe
for
do
example.
some skiing out there.
Yeah, I like
Be
that.
nice.
Awesome.
Be real nice.
Yeah.
Should we talk about windsurfing for a bit?
I think that's a great topic. So I think Chris and I, we're like a little bit outdoorsy. We're very aligned on that. And I've been windsurfing since I was like, I don't know, 14. So a long time ago. It's a great sport. And it's kind of a perfect fit for Cove. If you think about that association, lifestyle, get your life back. And then you can actually spend some time doing whatever floats your boat. I do have a stamp collection, believe it or not.
Things on the water. Well, that's your windsurfing and
then
stamp
stamps.
collecting.
Yeah, when I want to bring it down, I actually, kind of like put some stamps in the right things. It's German stamps mainly. I inherited my dad's stamps, but what happens is I get immediately impatient and I just got to get out there and get active, right? So high energy.
Yeah,
right.
You should bring up your stamp collection more often. I haven't heard you talk about that much.
I know.
Thought I knew you.
This was a surprise for Mike as well. But, I told him about that, so I don't know.
Well, so we're talking about windsurfing, which presumably is something you're gonna that floats your boat,
right?
Something you're gonna do on the water. I was learning about today that Cove may not translate into other, perhaps Slavic languages or even German as well as one might have anticipated. So maybe share with the group here today a little bit about what we learned about, Cove for a German speaker.
Yeah, Cove for a German speaker doesn't really mean much, right? Cove, but we had to actually translate it, and I think the word we found was laguna. Like laguna, it's a tropical place, right? But it meant absolutely nothing. What's Cove? It's not a cave, right? It's a cove. It's a chill place, and then it clicked, right? So the benefits of cloud first saves a lot of time. You can start doing stuff that's fun, still get the same outcomes, and actually have some money to afford the trip, right? Because it's actually more profitable. So I think that's generally the idea, but it translates not always so well. So Laguna. But what was interesting, what I learned in Brazil, is that Cove is actually the name for. Oh my God! Now I'm trying to remember.
Salada green.
The green green cabbage, but
the
what
thing
is
in
it?
your morning
kale.
drink? Yes,
kale, Grünkohl, kale, and the reason that's so good, it's the same word, but it is actually a health. So we had the saying when I was in Brazil, it's a healthy way of doing your backup or your disaster recovery, however you want to look at it. So it's kind of cool. You can play around with the word quite a bit, but
it's more international than. We may have anticipated.
Correct.
Portuguese applies perfectly.
Yes.
Healthy backups.
Healthy backups.
It's great.
Yeah.
So, like, what keeps you up at night? Like, what like you've got all this like relaxation. You're out in the water. You've got all your time back. Obviously, your job is very relaxed. Um, I
Right.
I'm guessing things just pretty much run itself. So
Yeah.
what does cause you stress? Is there anything? I mean, everyone's got something.
Yeah, there's of course always like I will say that I worry about sometimes, just missing something. When we get attacked, it's as when our customers get attacked, I really feel that I do feel the profound responsibility that we have a product that works and will allow them to get out of Dodge. Now, luckily, I talked to several of them that actually used it restoring from a destructive cyber attack, and it worked, so that's great. But that will continue to keep me up at night in a sense of that'll always be a priority, right? But also what excites me, what keeps me, or what energizes me is I like to build, right? I like to build, and here we get to build a product that's growing, but more importantly, we get to build a team, and we get to build a business. I think this is relevant for our partners, right? So we can actually we're in this together, and we're not going to grow when our partners and don't grow, and the partners are not going to grow when the customers are not getting the outcome they want. So it's very direct correlation. And I think that's what's nice about it. And I get to actually think about this and think about the longer term strategy because I don't have to mess around with tedious things over here, and I'm not distracted with 10 other products. And I kind of draw a parallel. If I were working on like patching all the time or storage expansion. And now I finally patch my server and then I have to work with server vendor A or B to do that next procurement cycle. Probably would have a lot less time. So I think it fits actually metaphorically quite nice to what John talked about earlier is, you got to save some time first through automation and having the right architecture before you can start thinking about what do I need to do to grow the business. And clearly, a big piece of that is to grow and develop the team. And for that, I need time.
You need time, and I would argue you need the right state of mind.
Very true.
So being
Very
in that
true.
relaxed state of mind is
That definitely
all
helps.
part of it, right?
Yeah. Can I ask you, though, what keeps you up at night?
Oh, that is a great question. Um, what I would say, I agree that critical moment when the phone rings, someone's under pressure to restore. Sometimes we've observed some people don't spend a lot of time in preparation. Worst case scenario, they're testing out disaster recovery for the first time when they actually have a disaster. Don't recommend that. Shouldn't do that. If you're doing that today, I'd recommend changing that behavior and actually trying it out earlier than the actual disaster. But yeah, certainly that moment of truth, knowing like authentically that we are holding some small medium-sized business in our hands. The MSP is trusting us to hold them in their hands, and that this is probably a business that some person has spent 10 or 20 or 30 years building, and it's more or less their legacy. It's more than just a job, much more than a job. It's you know um, can be a generational thing even, and knowing that you're responsible for that is a huge responsibility. It is a weight that it has to work. So I'm glad that in 10 years of doing this, I've never felt that we have let anyone down specifically in that scenario. Sometimes there has been challenges along the way where it's been it's great that we got great resources like Eric Harless and a
Hmm.
great support team, Alexei Slitsky and
Yeah.
his team, and the fact that they're there 24/7, and that people will jump out of bed or do whatever it takes when that critical situation comes, and it's that culture that I don't know, I'm super proud of. There's just a care factor that I think is higher than I've seen in other environments I've worked with and stories I hear from other groups and so on. That care factor is sort of just what makes, you know, a life worth living, something to be proud of in terms of the what Cove is doing today.
Yeah, and I can attest to that from firsthand data that it is actually a different culture and it is a different mindset And it's nice to have these. And thanks for calling out those individuals because they're awesome. They're just one of many,
Many,
right?
for sure.
But absolutely. Yeah.
So, I think in past conversations we've talked about getting back to some of the basics of just 10 years ago when sort of origins were underway, that there were some architectural choices that were made that might have been a little ahead of their time in that moment, and that's helped advance the cause and allowed for a lot of great things today. And by way of comparison, there's other companies that are well known. Some of them are green, some of them have a blue tinge to them, some of them might have appliances associated, some you know maybe don't. But either way, they've made some different choices, and kind of curious you've seen both sides of the story. You've even worked with an appliance vendor in a previous life. So curious to ask that architectural choice, kind of from day zero. What's your observation coming in along the ride on the impact of that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. My entrepreneurship professor at Babson once said, luck is where opportunity and preparation meet, right? It's like at that intersection. And, I think this is kind of like a very interesting time. So I think the architecture, in a lot of ways, was ahead of its time. So preparation was there. The way the architecture works is highly efficient, but I would argue wouldn't have had as many distributed systems. Cloud wasn't as adopted, but now you have more and more data. Everyone wants to go to the cloud first, or even cloud only. Clearly, everyone's worried about a cyber attack, and the endpoints are more distributed than ever, right? So we have the time is right, really, for this type of architecture. SaaS, the backup infrastructure is in the cloud, the backup copies are in the cloud, they're isolated, and we have a way to more efficiently than the other colors, right, vendors, to move the data. And actually, because the way we operate, we're also more granular in our restore. So doing a file level restore of exactly this file is a PIA when you have an image-based solution because, I got to restore the image, browsable catalog, blah, 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 and it's just a pain. So this way, like in a cyber attack, you're going to be very targeted. It's not like this bulk recovery, typically something. So there's that. And I think the other thing, what customers are realizing, I don't have enough people. There are fewer. That's what I saw on the other side, previous job. The enterprise space is shrinking. And within that enterprise base, the data protection, the backup experts are shrinking. It's a smaller and smaller population. So that puts a lot of stress on simplifying even enterprise solutions, making them easier to use. But nothing can beat the right architecture. So I was the product manager for backup software, two of them, three actually, and then also an integrated appliance. So I had the best of all worlds. And then, basically what we spend a lot of time doing, even on the R&D side, is to make sure that this server, type A, with that hypervisor, which is actually hidden, but it's still there, is interoperable with the software that we load on top of it, blah, blah, blah. So your qualification, things need to work. And in that case, many times the upgrade was problematic. It often didn't work. I think some appliance vendors do this very well, to be fair, right? They do this very well. But you can kind of already taste and appreciate that additional R&D effort, even going into just building the thing. So it's like, wouldn't you rather just build features and build something robust and elegant? I think to get the same outcome, definitely worthwhile. Put yourself on the other side, the user. I think a lot of our customers, but this is consistent in the enterprise and the SMB, want to get away from infrastructure maintenance because we just heard John talk about skill shortage. It's in every report that's out there. It's hard to even find good people. And then when you find someone good, we're going to punish them by doing, sort of the extraneous tasks versus allowing them to learn about Azure or learn about security, which is exciting and it's actually an investment right in the future. So people want to get away from managing. We don't want to take a maintenance window, do the procurement, manage vendor management. Doing storage expansion, sizing. I have to figure out what do I be small, medium, and large. What may it be? I don't know. Depends. I'm going to predict the storage growth by the middle one. Oh, now I have to upgrade, and then when I upgrade, I have to roll it out every 3 years. The rep knocks on my door. Hey, want to buy another one? Great. So this whole transaction model and the technical model is very time consuming. And of course, because of that, prices aren't going up. Generally speaking, margins are eroding. That's going to be problematic, right? So you're really not talking about a profitable business model. But I think the biggest problem is, given your team size of whatever it is, you have 10 people, you're going to spend too much of your time not on value added stuff, and you're not going to get ahead.
So if you're a service provider, do you what would be your response if someone said to you that you could add more customers but not add more employees?
Yeah, I think that would be obviously pretty compelling.
Pretty attractive
Yeah,
statement.
yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Or potentially, I might know a way for you to do more with less.
That
Also interesting. And I think that's really like summing up all that complexity that you described.
right.
Cove is really just putting its arms around all that complexity, all those tasks and
Yeah,
all those hours and all that hardware, and just taking it off the desks of our customers, our technicians, and bringing them back. So
yeah.
they got time to get their life back. They're not working weekends. They're, able to go windsurfing.
Well, which is why I used a lot of words to describe what you summed up elegantly. So it's a great metaphor for the complexity and all this stuff you have to think about.
I think we should take this in yet another direction.
I like
What do you
it.
think? You like it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you have in mind?
Well, um, I think we should now head north and talk about uh, this idea uh, of ba- backup as a service versus disaster recovery as a service. Now, a wise person once said to me that backup as a service means that you basically want to recover in hours or days, and disaster recovery as a service means you want to recover in minutes or hours. So somewhere in there, they're almost touching, but they're different. How would you react to that statement? Is that a correct categorization of backup as a service versus disaster recovery as a service?
Yeah, I think so. Even with Baz, I don't even know if you're even thinking about recovery as much, right? But certainly you're not really thinking about objectives, recovery point objectives, recovery time objectives. So just by uttering the words disaster recovery as a service, right? Which you need backups for, arguably, you need copies.
Obviously.
You have to start thinking about what are the goals, what are the primary objectives. And so that gets in a nice conversation, forcing me to think about what are my recovery times, right? And now you can think about the architecture that would actually deliver the job, the desired outcome. And so I think it's a nice way to think about it, because the minute you start thinking about disaster recovery as a service, there will be expectations around being able to recover faster, even close to instant. Or if you can't do it in a cyber attack because it's unrealistic, it's going to put more focus on, can I restore it to where I want, to where the cyber response team sits, so they can run some. So it just immediately drives all this awareness to further questions that are really not on the map, and I'm just thinking backup as a service. I kind of back it up, and then I worry about, in the moment. And living in the moment is great when you're windsurfing. It's a horrible idea when you're trying to prevent a disaster or respond, right?
Of course. All right. So one other angle that I've once heard on the same topic, backup is means that you've got storage, a copy of the data in a proprietary format, likely encrypted proprietary format of a uh, of backup copies of your data, versus disaster recovery is defined as having available a bootable copy of your environment. How would you react to that statement? Is that a better line to maybe draw?
Yeah, that's actually very interesting because it kind of like turns this whole paradigm about, oh, I'm going to have a copy of this proprietary data set on my network because it's faster, right? It's on the LAN, the local area network. It's got to be faster. And then I have another one in the cloud and a third one over there, maybe a fourth one on the vault, and depending on how big and how much money you have to waste, essentially, right? And then you worry about sort of the restore from either one of those points, but it's not prepped, even if the proprietary data, you're right. So the benefit is it's, can't be corrupted, and so there are benefits, but, you still need to restore it. So even from the local, you need to restore, and it's going to take some time. Why not just back it up into the cloud? And then you worry about maintaining a bootable copy, right, of a true virtual machine on a piece of infrastructure that's already in your network. It's already got the right users and access credentials,
Secure.
and it's secure, and it basically now requires a well-known restore process, right? I mean, if it's already as a mounted VM, as an example, I can turn it on. Okay, if I want to put it just load a flat VHDX file on a NAS server. Okay, you have to do the conversion, but every IT administrator knows how to do those steps. So it's not only a common data format in the context of what I'm restoring to, but it's also a very common restore mechanism once I already have the copy there, if that makes sense.
Right. And as a natural extension, maybe this is the right place to ask a question then. So standby image versus, file recovery. Some of the things that Cove does, do you think that aligns with that same philosophy?
I definitely do, because if you think about, I love that you pointed out the file recovery. You could use an email recovery. It's kind of in a way a content level. There's a content I've defined as you have a file, you have an email, right? So it's content aware, and I can do a very granular restore of a specific file, visually really looking the same way the file tree looks like on your laptop. So I pick this drive or whatever that, and then I do the recovery. It's very granular and it's instant. Where it's unknown is if I have to restore an image first, then I look at a weird browsable catalog, right, that looks a little bit because it's provided by the backup, and then I have to find, or I have to do a search and restore, whatever, right? So that would be, but that's useful for logical corruption. Stefan messes up a file, but it's so easy. So it could be actually relevant in a cyber attack. So I would say it's also, Cove is equally elegant when it comes to a restore of an email. You pick Brahm's email, inbox, boom, and then you can restore it to an alternate or, whatever path. With the server, it's kind of a little bit, almost a bit more interesting, but it's conceptually very similar because, you are putting it in like format, and it happens to be, a server image. And what's nice there is you have a great degree of flexibility of where to put it to. And you also have a great degree of flexibility, whether you want to do it on demand. Yep, it's going to take longer, but I don't have to maintain it. Or if I want to keep it there for that close to instant recovery. And that makes sense because you don't need instant recovery, I would argue, for a file or an email. It's a different use case. But when it comes to business critical infrastructure, there's a case to be made. And you're basically maintaining an up-to-date copy all the time with a close to zero RTO. And arguably, of course, there are RPOs, the recovery point objectives are also very granular. So there's a lot to be liked about this type of approach.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that's why we're probably making some waves down in the Cove.
So. Yep.
See what I did there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So the
took a while.
He's just processing. I knew he was not with me. So now let's talk about innovation. Innovation. It ain't easy. I read a headline today that Cove now allows, or has offered up the feature of recovering servers, whether they exist, originally in Azure, or whether they might be running in an on-premise environment, or they might be running in a colo facility, anywhere they may live. And now you can recover them directly back into Azure, which suggests to me now I don't need to buy hardware, and I have some very good outs, some very strong outs in the case of some type of disaster, whether it be a full site loss or hardware failure, cyber incident. I'm guessing all those use cases make landing in an Azure tenant as a very relevant or useful option to have. Maybe I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the applicability of Azure. How well is Azure suited for this use case as a destination to recover a server in the case of a disaster?
I think it's actually quite well suited for a lot of reasons. In a way, it's just infrastructure we're talking about. I mean, it is, and it's infrastructure you own. You bring it to the party. So let's talk about that aspect first. Whether you're bringing your own server, whether you're bringing a NAS, like network attached shared storage, or whether you're bringing your Azure instance, it's all compute, and whether your server sits in your data center or a co-location facility, conceptually it's the same, right? So the benefit of that is, of course, this infrastructure is networked into it's part of your existing network. The user credentials are there, and there's a lot of things. So if we worry about restoring back into production in an automated way because it saves time, then this is a very good approach. Because even if an instant copy running spun up somewhere and I give you a VPN tunnel, you still have to worry about restoring it back into production. It can only ever be a temporary solution. So if you're paying $100 or whatever the number is for something that's temporary, I'm like, okay, there's maybe some temporary value, but I'm more interested is how do we bring customers back into production? So arguably this is part of your production environment, so that already solves that problem largely. And then of course the question is, well, what about on-prem? So I'm owning my own hardware, right? Versus using something like Azure. And I think these benefits are pretty ubiquitous and well understood, but in scenario one, I would have to find a server or buy a server. So maybe I repurpose it. Okay, great. And then I have to have data center costs. So, the fans keep running, I have to cool the thing, blah, blah, blah. And that is a cost that just keeps metering. And it's a pretty expensive, well, it's not expensive, it's one option. But if you think about it, I'm kind of like metering this cost for an eventual recovery, right? I have my copy there, but
An eventual possibility of a recovery.
Correct. Eventual possibility of a recovery that nobody hopes will ever happen, right? But it's still a small investment compared to what we see in the enterprise with 2 data centers and multiple copies, right? There's a time for and a budget for everything, right? But if we're solving for pragmatic restores from disasters that happen more frequently, right? I think that seems to be a good approach. So, but then I have to buy the machine, so I have a capital outlay, and then I will have to rebuy it in 3 years, whatever the typical life cycle is, 3 years, and then off we go. So I can do it this way. But of course, what's nice about Azure is, the hyperscaler benefits. I can put a copy there, but I really only need to worry about turning on the meter when I use it, right? So when I light it up, I turn it on. So
when you're when you're testing, when you
test
into a real disaster.
Yeah, when that eventually thing that we hope is not going to happen, that disaster actually happens, I can light it up.
So basically,
you mean pay as you go, right?
It's like only when you need it.
Yeah, as on demand. I heard different terms. That seems.
That seems to make a lot of sense for the disaster. I'm curious for the disaster recovery use case specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Don't pay for it till you need it. You rarely need it.
Right.
Would you? I would argue that is creating like a new economic paradigm for disaster recovery. It's kind of breaking traditional thought of how much you need to invest along the way, because traditionally, to be ready, you needed all this extra stuff to be sitting on standby.
Yeah.
It seems to me that the hyperscaler kind of breaks that type of thinking and says, you don't have to pay for anything to be on standby. It's free until you actually need it.
Yes, and how you then actually price that out is totally up to you, but you would deliver arguably greater value, right? Because of just this concept of restoring, or maybe you're maintaining an active copy as a standby image so you can sell a shorter recovery time. Your cost equation will be more, so your more value. Cost equation is favorable because you're really delivering it. You're only paying as you need it, right? And then I would argue it's also more resilient, unless we believe that your server that's sitting in the broom closet or whatever is more resilient than the hyperscaler clouds. But I know that Azure and AWS, they have made a lot of investment, as Google, in resiliency features, all of which are available for you. So, and some customers pay a premium for that. They're willing to pay a premium for resilience.
They sure are. I mean, if I think about some of the traditional like appliance vendors, for example, that have paired, an appliance with an offsite a copy where you can actually spin up in the case of a site loss and so on. If we think about, and I want a snap answer on this one. This one's got to be
tight.
It's got to be tight. 20 seconds from the word go. Failing over to the vendor cloud versus using Azure as a target for disaster recovery. Go.
Failing over to the vendor cloud, you pay twice. You get instant gratification. Failing over to the Azure instance, you pay as you need it, pay as you go, and it's already restored actually back into production. Sounds like a pretty good, compelling value proposition.
Seems to make sense.
Yeah.
Vendor cloud, it's just a temporary solution. It's like putting a spare tire from the back of your car, that little donut that you can only drive, 50 miles an hour on, or maybe 45, versus putting like Azure. It's a full-fledged tire, it sounds like. You can just put it on and you're good to go for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and if you don't like the tire, you can actually change it like while you're driving, right? That's pretty compelling as well. So you can change the specifications, right? It's cloud.
Yeah, which is great.
Yes.
Like if you've got a high-performance car, like let's say a Prius,
Yeah,
as an example, you might want to put some high-performance tires on it.
absolutely.
Low profile,
Yeah.
maybe little spinning rims.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The spinners are important. And you definitely don't want to do the donut. I tried that.
Oh, is that
It was
right?
actually rusted to the frame of the trunk, and then I tried to get it out.
Oh, in the Prius.
And
Right, It's great, man. But how many surfboards does it hold?
3. I'm going to
that's
go
great.
for 3 this time.
Yeah.
Because I got a new one. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you noticed that? I feel like people are kind of lining up to see what we're doing here. Have you noticed it
Yeah.
becoming particularly busy around us?
Getting pretty loud and a little bit
Yeah.
rambunctious. It's nice, yeah.
So let's go drink some beer.
Let's bring beer and then
All
do
right,
next
all
one.
right, all right.
He's
We're
like,
calling it.
"Thank God."